viewers. Now, anyone following the Adani case would be well aware of Nelson Amenya. He is a fearless, courageous Kenyan entrepreneur and journalist, and now, surprisingly, he's been addressed as a whistleblower. Nelson has emerged as a pivotal figure in exposing a secretive multi-billion dollar deal between the Kenyan government and India's Adani Group. His revelations have not only ignited political upheaval but also garnered international attention and support from citizens both in Kenya and abroad, and especially from all of us here in India. Nelson, thank you very much for joining our show on the Public India platform. Now, I'll start with a very different question. I was going through your profile on Twitter, and there's a pinned tweet there which you have put on November 26th. It says, "We will eat them for lunch before they eat us for dinner." Did you have anything very specific in mind while pinning this tweet in these days when you are, in the limelight?
Well, it's quite interesting that you ask because this is it's a saying that is very popular in Algeria. So it's an Arab proverb and very it's used oftenly in Algeria. And so my friend from Algeria is the one who actually told me about this, and it's an analogy of before your enemy strikes, you strike.
Right.
Before they strike, you
Yeah.
strike, so that when they strike, it's too late. So this is the analogy, and with everything that is happening, so it's
Right.
basically to tell people that we know they're planning, we know what they're planning, but before they strike, we will strike before them, and we will prevail. It's also speaking to the country's political situation, economic situation at the moment. So many
Right.
people are complaining about the economy, but the political class seem to be living a different kind of life and living in in utopia. They don't feel like the citizens are suffering. So as you saw with the finance bill, we brought it down. We brought down the Adani deals. So we are also going step by step until we reclaim our country. Yeah.
Yeah, Nelson, let me start with asking you. I know a question which many have asked all over the days, and I also respect that you have to hide your sources. But firstly, why at all did you decide to investigate the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport deal? Because on the face of it, a deal like this was looking very good for Kenya. The airport needed improvements, it needed upgradations. There was issues in the airport, and here was someone from outside who was willing to put in the money and then take his money back over a period of 30 years. And many within your country, even your ex prime minister, has said that the deal was good for the country. So, what made you, in the first place, to go into this and start an investigation?
Well, thank you for this question. It's quite important to understand my motivations for this revelations. So, yes, in the beginning, I was just like any other Kenyan. I felt like this is something that is overdue. You must have seen that 10 years ago we tried to have a new new terminal building, but and a new, it was called the Greenfield project, but it never really it didn't take off. It was marred with a lot of controversy as well, and the Kenyan taxpayers ended up losing about 4.5 billion Kenya shillings. And so this upgrade of the airport is nothing new. It's something that the country has been looking forward to. And when I first encountered, this secret deal, to me it was like, okay, maybe it's a good thing that they found finally someone who can do it and who has their own money to invest in the deal, in the project for the next 30 years. But when I began to look at the specific details of the deal, that's when I started to get alarmed. I was seeing red flags everywhere, and that's the basis of my motivation to come out and reveal the secretive deals. They had broken some Kenyan laws, and obviously the key terms in the deal were all going to profit Adani more than they would profit the country. So why would you want a conglomerate to benefit more than benefiting the country? In the first place, the reason why they've been accepted is because they're supposed to bring value. We are supposed to see value for money, but there was no value for money in this case. So this is why.
Nelson, this was not the first time that such a deal had come to Kenya. We
Yeah.
already seen the Kenya electricity distribution company. They were dealing with Adani. And there were rumors that Adani had a few years ago approached the Kenyan government for the Mombasa port. And I really don't know what happened to that deal. There are all sorts of rumors, but probably that deal also never went through. So, in the line of Adani's presence in Kenya, he keeps trying for many projects. Why do you still feel that this was not beneficial? What were the specific reasons that you found that the airport deal doesn't really benefit the country?
Yeah. Okay. So before I answer this question, I saw in the Financial Times. So the Financial Times recently published a story about Adani and what is happening in Kenya. And one source from Adani actually said that they first came to Kenya to do the port, the Mombasa port, and the airport only came later. And right now there is rumors that Adani has already been given part of our seaport to run. So in the port we have the berth, so there is berth 1, 2, 3. So they've been given, I think, one berth, but we are in the process of trying to find out the true story. But this is a rumor that is going around right now. And
Okay.
the energy project is quite an interesting project as well, because it was before the airport project, but um, there was a company called Africa 50. So Africa 50 is a subsidiary of African Development Bank, and Africa 50 was also bidding for the power grid, and it came even before Adani. But what happened is that Adani was given preferential treatment, so its proposal was approved quicker. The process went quicker for them, obviously because there was some powerful forces, pushing Adani proposal more than the Africa 50. And Africa 50 had actually better terms, like let's say the cost of debt was cheaper, the cost of the project itself was cheaper. But Adani, irrespective of this, was being pushed, to go quickly, just exactly the way the airport, we're going to see what happened to the airport. So it was the same thing. It's only that the documents of the energy deal were quite secretive. So up to now, nobody has ever seen the actual proposal documents or even the agreement that they made. But luckily, right now it's cancelled. So though there is a lot of uncertainty to what will happen next, because it was, cancelled by an announcement from the president, but not really. There is no writing, to cancel and terminate this agreement. So we don't really know what's going to happen, but we are waiting to see how it will turn out. And now coming back to the airport deal and the proposal that I saw in the beginning. So it's important to understand that even before we begin to look at the financial aspect of it, to try and analyze the value for money, the government actually broke the law in approving this project, first of all, they need to do public participation, which they never did. And in the procurement laws, it's the default procurement method is competitive bidding. So where you do open tendering. And this is common practice world over. Even in India, I was checking, Adani does open tendering processes, though it's marred by a lot of corruption and manipulation, but they still do it. So why didn't they do it in Kenya? The reason why they didn't do it in Kenya is because they were told by the Kenyan officials that they can skip this process and just directly go to do the project. And they were using these procurement laws as a loophole, like a loose end, because there is four methods. So there is the competitive bidding, which is the default method, the recommended method, and then there is privately initiated proposal. Then you have direct procurement, and you have restricted bidding. So they went straight to privately initiated proposal. For this privately initiated proposal, you need to meet a few criteria. For example, the idea needs to be original, so it needs to originate from you. You need to have some kind of unique technology, or you need to have some, maybe some patent that we cannot find with other companies. So you need to basically justify why you didn't go for competitive bidding. And so the government of Kenya, through obviously Kenya Airports Authority, they had hired a transaction advisor for this project, and this transaction advisor was actually a consultant way before even these projects began. And they had done the JKIA aviation policy. They did the master plan for JKIA. You know how they want to upgrade the airport in the next 20 years. So all this was already there. So it wasn't an idea that came from Adani. It was something that was already in the pipeline for Kenya Airports Authority. And as I told you, 10 years ago, we tried again to upgrade the airport, but it didn't really work out. And then, so this company that was the consulting firm is really quite interesting and an important factor in this whole expose, because they did a feasibility report almost the same time when Adani was initiating their proposal and actually submitted. So they finished their report in February, and Adani submitted the proposal in March. And in February of this year, this consulting firm, in their report, they recommended that Kenya uses competitive bidding. Then they said that they're not aware at the time that they're doing the report of any company that is doing a privately initiated proposal or wants to do so. They were not aware. But in court documents, the government revealed that Adani was already in talks with the economic advisor, the chief economic advisor for the president, since 2023 in April. So basically, just a little less than a year, they were in communication. They were exchanging communication. In December, also, the president went to India and met Prime Minister Modi, and in this meeting, the presidential advisor, so the economic advisor of the president, David Ndii, also revealed on his X account, that they also met with Gautam Adani in India in December, and he expressed interest in the airport. So basically, what was happening with this transaction advisor, they either were not given this information, or they were given the information but they didn't mention in the report. So the report said that there was no one who had expressed interest in the PIP. This was in February, and they were recommending competitive bidding. And then in March, Adani comes and submits a proposal, and the proposal is approved in a record one day. So after approval in one day, it's taken to the Ministry of Treasury. So after being in the Kenya Airports Authority, which is like the client, So it's taken to the Ministry of Treasury, where the Public-Private Partnership Directorate is based, and this is where it's supposed to be approved, the second layer of approval. So here it was approved, but with a few recommendations. So it was approved, but they said you guys need to go back and look at this, a few things that we noted that do not look correct. So some of these things, well, I consider them red flags because I also saw them in the proposal. For example, they said that they're not satisfied with the public interest criteria. So it means that they didn't do any public participation. And this committee actually pointed it out in April that there was not enough public participation done. In July, when I was exposing it, still there was no public participation that was done. And at this point, it was on the last stage before it was going to be approved. So basically, if my expose didn't come in July, it would have been signed in August, in just a month. Yeah, so this was part of the reason why my sources, were very concerned, and we decided to, expose it in July. At the backdrop of the protests in Kenya, there was already protests, anti-tax protest. Yeah, so there was already some kind of some unrest that we just rode on to push this expose. And yeah, so it really worked because there was protests in August, and then there was the airport workers strike. Yeah, so it boiled and boiled and become bigger and bigger. There was a lot of public uproar, so this really helped a lot in this expose. And then the next thing that this one shook the workers of the airport is that Adani wanted, when they take over, so after I think 1 year, they would issue new contracts to all the airport workers. And these contracts that they were going to issue, they're the ones who are going to dictate the terms of the contract. And if any worker didn't agree to the terms, then they asked the Kenya Airports Authority to transfer them to other departments. So there was no room for negotiation, or it was either you accept the contract, or Kenya Airport, now it becomes a liability of the government. But Adani, they don't want to care, what will happen. So the risk, this is they pushed it to the government. Something that is not talked about a lot, and something that I always forget to mention, is that they also wanted the Kenyan government to adjust laws for them. So they basically wanted the Kenyan government to change some laws for them to operate smoothly in the country, which is completely illegal, and it's unfair business practice. I mean, why should the government only change a law because of you and not because of all the other businesses? And they also wanted the government to give them a tax break. Okay, this is normal. Maybe it's to to lure FDI in the country, but they had requested for a 10-year tax break. So 10-year period of their choice. So this puts the company in a very sweet spot, It's unfair. It's some kind of unfair business practice that they wanted to have. And this was also raised in this committee. And one other thing that was raised by the committee was that, so Adani takes over in November. So this November was supposed to be the start date of the project. They take over in November, and they hike the levies of the airport. So landing fees, fees that is all the shops at the airport, all the vendors, all these levies were going up by 52% in November. So the committee was asking, how can you raise fees by 52%, no upgrade, nothing has happened, you haven't upgraded even the current terminal building, you have not brought in new machines, you're just increasing the levies. So it means the airport will basically become uncompetitive. And the only time they were going to have a new terminal building was in 2028. And they said that they will only think about a new runway if passenger traffic permits. So meaning the $2 billion that they were going to charge had no cost relating to a new terminal. So it means in the future, Kenya was going to spend even more money, or Kenya was going to pay up more for a new runway.
Right.
And then, so they asked, going into the financial aspect, they wanted 18% return on investment every year. So,
Wow.
irrespective of how much you make, they still want their 18% return on their investment every year. And then they wanted, after the 30 years, to keep 18% equity on the airport. And on top of that, they still wanted to. So they said that when they transfer the assets to KAA, they will do a valuation of all the assets that they built, basically, and they will charge KAA. So basically, what will happen is that all the assets that they ever built, they're going to sell it again to KAA. So it's like KAA is paying double. They already paid because they recoup their investment through the revenues, and then now they're selling again these assets back to
Right.
KAA. It doesn't make
Right.
sense. So the
Right.
financial aspect of this deal was just crazy.
Right.
And Adani thought maybe this was they had found some some stupid people to bribe, and then they can come and do whatever they want and
Right.
put some crazy terms in the deal. Yeah, so my sources were very, very worried about all these terms, and there are more. It was some 75 pages proposal and 300-page feasibility report. The feasibility report was quite fishy because it had satellite images of the airport, of the runway. They had master plans. So it was
Right.
something that was really planned from inside of the government. They had given them access to data, give them access to information, basically to come up with a very detailed feasibility report. Because if they didn't have any access to the government information, they wouldn't have this kind of details. They
Correct.
had charts with predicted cash flows, cash flows over 30 years, passenger traffic, and the growth per year, the growth of revenue. So everything was quite detailed. And you can only do this if you're given financial
Government.
data, this kind of data,
Government.
so that, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Nelson, before I hand over to Anand, just one last question. William Ruto, once the expose came out, you did that in July. And then there were the 3, 4 months in between when all these protests were going on. Why did the president act when Adani was indicted by the US? Why didn't he act when your report came out and all these protests were happening on the streets? Why didn't he at that time stop this project?
So first of all, the president, if you look at what happened during the anti-finance bill protests, it took
Hmm.
the people breaking into parliament and actually causing, like huge damage to his image. Many people died. So for them to listen to the people, it takes a lot. And first of all, they were scared because if they annulled or they canceled the deal because of my expose, then everything that I said was going to be, oh yeah, so he was right. That's why they canceled the deal. And also, if they canceled the deal, then probably all the bribes that they ever received, they were. It was going to be a little bit challenging. They were thinking about it before this U.S. indictment came. Actually, what was happening in the background was that they were going only to cancel the airport deal because it had become a hot potato. It had become a political issue, like it was going to eat some parliamentarians. It had become quite a political situation, and
Right.
it was becoming more and more volatile. So they were going to drop it. but they didn't know how to drop it, because if they drop it, then it vindicates me. And
Right.
if they keep going, then the public uproar keeps going on. People will keep asking questions. So for me, I feel like the president, this is something he's used to. Looking at the finance bill, it took people dying in the streets for him to cancel the finance bill.
Right.
And the same thing happened. So after my expose, they were still trying to see whether they can get away with it. But when the election came, then
Right.
this was a perfect moment for them to run to run away from the deal. Yeah, so they
Right.
just used it as a scapegoat.
Okay. Thank you,
And so
Nelson. It was a pleasure having you on our show. Take care that we are worried and you take care of yourself. Thank you.